Welcome in Sam Bradshaw, Sic'Em365.com. And Sam, you and I texted earlier this week about some of the things that happened to Baylor, especially late in that game. They had 10 men on the field for a couple plays on defense. It's been something different every which way in this 6-game losing streak. How do they break out of this, and is there a common thread through this that keeps happening to them?
Thanks for having me on. And as frustrating as the drive from hell on defense was that Saturday, the thing that's probably most frustrating about this team is it's always something else. It's just that they're giving you just enough to believe that they're going to pull it out, and then they find a new way to hurt themselves. You know, you're talking about a Baylor defense that prior to that drive where I broke it down on the site, where just some very concerning, cautious play calling, putting two guys 8 yards off of their slowest tight end, who was the defensive lineman last year, and leaving a linebacker one-on-one with their slot receiver on multiple plays, and not having 10 guys on the field. One of those plays probably would have either picked off the ball or forced a throwaway or forced a sack. They just put themselves in a bad position. And prior to that drive, they were holding Utah below 25 yards per drive and had held them to, I think, 6 points. And each of those was just off of one play setting it up, whether it was an interception or whether it was just a long run where two Baylor Bears missed a tackle. And then you let a third-string quarterback go 88 yards on you, doing absolutely nothing to put yourself in position to be successful with a very worn-out defensive line that was missing your top nose tackle and missing your top jack linebacker. So it was already a pretty thin rotation to begin with. You know, it's just very, very disappointing. And offensively, they faded in the second half, but they're also up against a very good Utah defense. It's been good for a long time. And in the first half, before the ankle caught up with your backup quarterback, who'd been pretty good, you were averaging 43 yards a drive on a very good defense. And then in the second half, it really went away when they realized he couldn't really run and he wasn't all that experienced as a passer. So they clamped down on the run, made him throw, and he coughed it up a couple times. But you're also talking about a kid that really hadn't had a whole lot of game experience at the D1 level. So you're going to take the good with the bad. And honestly, on the offensive side of the ball, after the complete disaster of assignments that you had in week 1 against Texas State, your non-quarterback rushing average being 4.2 yards per carry against the Utah defense that's really good at sniffing out the run is pretty solid. And, you know, while it's not any number to run home and brag about, it certainly shows marked improvement from what they had week 1. And when you can get a healthy Blake Shapen in there later, and you could potentially get those defensive lineman starters back healthy later as well, it bodes better long-term for this team, whether the record shows it or not, that they'll be able to be competitive with the Big 12, where UCF's now without their starting quarterback. Then you face Texas Tech, who's the last team that Baylor beat, and they not only beat them, they beat them like a drum on the night that Mahomes was being honored at home. Then Cincinnati's new. Iowa State's not exactly terribly strong, and neither is Houston. There's potential to have some wins down the stretch.
So, Sam, this week, do you expect to learn anything new about them, or is this one where they can just go out and get the win so they can get the losing feeling out of their head for even 6 days?
It's more of option B, but as somebody who has to preview about 12 to 13 teams a year schematically, I will say LIU does some things on both sides of the ball that'll give guys some good live reps against some looks that they don't always see. And it'll be good just to at least have the film study from that. In particular for Sawyer, not having a whole lot of live action at quarterback. This is a team that will, while their front really doesn't change too much, they'll typically be in a tight front with an overhang linebacker to either side and one stack linebacker behind them. What they do in coverage, one play, it's all out man coverage. The next play, it's zone coverage. And then they'll give you some different looks. It's not just cover 2. They'll run some basic cover 2, but then they'll do Tampa 2 with the corners playing what's known as trap 2, where instead of being outside the receiver and rerouting them inside to help the safety, they've got somebody dropping in that deep middle hole, so the safeties can play wider, and then the corners can play inside the receiver and actually help out fitting against the run and turning it back inside to their front six. So they can give you a lot of different looks. And while they definitely don't have the talent to hang with you, they have the ability to put things on film in a way that will allow Baylor to help themselves get better.
So, what was your total assessment of Sawyer Robertson after his first start?
I think he has the athleticism to do an awful lot, both throwing the ball and running the ball. I think at times he has some accuracy, but I think he can be a little streaky. And I think he's a young quarterback that costed up twice against a very good defense. And so while I think he's definitely got a lot of potential, and I think he can get there, I understand why Chapin was the winner in fall camp. Chapin against Texas State with basically no protection lit them on absolute fire. And the only thing that was stopping that offense was their own false starts and their own inability to protect the passer. But grading on the curve of, yeah, you got absolutely no protection, he was lighting it up. And I think that Sawyer played really well when healthy against Utah. But then when Utah could kind of tee off and force him to play in only one way, he really struggled. But most good defenses would do that to a young quarterback in that situation. So I'm not going to hold it too hard against them.
What was the offensive line who played a lot better week 1 to week 2? What was the key for that improvement?
Well, I think there's a bit of a reshuffling that I think helped. And as Aranda mentioned in the post game of the Texas State game, in that game, it took them a quarter and a half to ID the defense correctly. And I think working on the details of that and having that good to go from the beginning of the game helped a ton. Just keeping their assignment straight, but also just reshuffling and better technique helped across the board. You saw the defensive line up until the very end of the game. They were doing a lot better stopping the run. The first quarter, Utah barely got any real running game going. They had like 26 yards. And then in the second quarter, I think they just had the one long run. And then aside from that, nothing. And then in the third quarter, not really much of anything either. And it was really when you ran into a very late game situation with a tired defense, with a scheme that was effectively giving the run and the quarterback run away in order to foolishly protect against the deep ball against a quarterback that hadn't shown the ability to beat coverage. Compared to the complete, we're playing too high, we're not playing physical disaster you saw against a really not that great, but still better than people probably give him credit for, Texas State team, it was clearly a marked improvement, and you can at least take the encouragement that provides. Obviously, there's a long way to go because that offense that they faced on Saturday, the level of quarterback play and the level of spread concepts they're facing will be radically different than what you're facing in the Big 12. And Ludwig's a great offensive coordinator, but the way that they stress you is going to be different than what you'll see from a TCU, from a Texas Tech, from an Oklahoma, from a West Virginia, and a UCF for that matter. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this group grows and evolves. But I'm really just looking forward to finally seeing that group at full strength, because I do think that defense can look a lot better if you get Randolph and Boykins back, especially Boykins. He's the closest thing to Siaki Ika that really allows you to change the math on defense in terms of run-pass conflict, because he can draw that extra blocker yet still be a competent pass rusher for you, because he can really, really free up another body, keep the blockers off the linebackers in a way that the guys behind him really can't. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Baylor has when they're at full strength on the D-line.
Sam, what did they not do well week 1 to week 2? What stayed bad week 1 to week 2?
Well, offensively, you never want to average 5 false starts over a 2-game period. That's just effectively giving up a quarter of the field over the course of the game, completely unforced. I felt like defensively, obviously playing with 10 is never good. And if your defensive scheme is having 2 defensive backs, your star and your field safety, playing 8 yards off of the ball and not really threatening the slant and giving it away over and over again, that's either the coordinator not getting it, or it's a young player not understanding an automatic check that's supposed to be built into the coverage. And we saw that both with Mikey Matthews, the diminutive receiver that, wasn't exactly a star coming in, but Baylor sure made him look like one. And then Mickey Sugutaraga is their tight end who used to be a defensive lineman who's not exactly fleet of foot. They were giving it to him as well. So I wonder if that's a call from the coach's box, or if that's a younger player not understanding the situation, not understanding the defensive check that should be made. And these defensive coaches have a long track record of success. So I do think that's probably more on the young players making mental mistakes. And given the fact that one of them wasn't even on the field for 2 plays, certainly comports with that.
Sam Bradshaw, Sic'Em365.com. Sam, we'll talk again next week about how they are going to attack a resurgent Texas Longhorn team, which should be very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, Texas is certainly in year 3 of a rebuild, and Sarkisian has done a good job bringing talent into places that had actually dipped in talent, because for all the recruiting classes they had under Herman, the talent level had dipped significantly when Sarkisian got there. And you'll notice over the first 2 years, the primary contributors for them on offense were Sark guys. And it's year 3, and they've infused a lot of talent. Texas is going to be a different animal this year, but they got to make it through the entire Big 12, and I think somebody will get them.
Yeah, it's tough for anybody to go through unscathed. Sam, thanks so much. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks.
Sam Bradshaw, S11 on the site. You can subscribe at Sic'Em365.com and read and see his breakdowns every single week. You see he is insanely detailed in what he's doing. But yeah, Jack,